What if I told you that everything you believed about comfort and safety was a lie? We have become accustomed to considering ourselves the pinnacle of civilization, surrounding ourselves with concrete walls, climate control systems, and supermarkets. However, when faced with the wilderness without gadgets, modern humans are doomed to perish within the first few days. True survival skills were lost centuries ago when technology replaced our instincts and the knowledge of our ancestors. The indigenous peoples of North America, who lived in the vast expanses of the Great Plains and the forests of the East Coast, possessed secrets that seem like magic today. They did not fight nature, but used its hidden mechanisms, turning a hostile environment into their home. Their technologies did not require electricity, but solved the problems of thermoregulation, food preservation, and navigation more effectively than many modern devices. These were not primitive solutions, but the result of thousands of years of observation and experimentation, sometimes at the cost of life itself. We have forgotten these simple truths, relying on the fragile achievements of progress, which can fail at any moment. But this knowledge has not disappeared. It is waiting for us to pay attention to it again. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how a piece of dried meat could be stored for decades without a refrigerator, and what secret allowed Native Americans to see through a snowstorm without losing their eyesight. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of food forever? Imagine a product that doesn't spoil for years, doesn't require airtight packaging, and contains more energy than any modern sports bar. For tribes roaming the Great Plains, preserving food was a matter of life and death, especially in the face of harsh winters. Ordinary meat spoils in a matter of hours in the open air, turning into poison. The solution was a technology that was later adopted by polar explorers and fur traders, who called it the ideal fuel for humans. We are talking about pemmican, a unique concentrate prepared by the women of the Lakota, Cree, and Blackfoot tribes. The process began with the preparation of bison meat, which was cut into thin strips and dried in the sun or over the slow smoke of a fire. It was important to remove all moisture from the fibers so that bacteria had nowhere to multiply. The meat, dried to a rock-hard consistency, was ground into powder using stone pestles and mortars. This meat flour was nutritious on its own, but real pemmican required one more key ingredient. This ingredient was melted fat obtained from the most caloric parts of the carcass. Fat served not only as a source of tremendous energy, but also as an ideal preservative, sealing meat particles from contact with oxygen. Hot fat was poured over the meat powder in a 1-to-1 ratio, thoroughly mixing the mass until it was homogeneous. Dried berries, bird cherry, erga, or cranberry were often added to the mixture, which added vitamins and a pleasant sourness to the product. The resulting mixture was packed into bags made of rawhide, tightly packed to remove all air bubbles. In this form, pemmican could be stored for 5 to 10 years without losing its taste and nutritional qualities. The bags of pemmican were stored in special storage pits or carried along during long journeys. The compactness of this product is striking. One 40-kilogram bag was enough to feed a family for several months. European colonists, having tasted pemmican for the first time, called it the bread of the desert and quickly appreciated its strategic importance. It did not require any time to prepare. It could be eaten dry on the go, boiled into a thick soup, or fried with flour. It was the first freeze-dried food in history, created without vacuum dryers or chemical preservatives. The secret lay in a deep understanding of food chemistry and the properties of fats. For warriors going on long raids, a piece of pemmican in their belt replaced a heavy cart with provisions. This gave them incredible mobility and autonomy, allowing them to travel hundreds of kilometers without stopping to hunt. They could hide in shelters for days without lighting a fire for cooking and without giving away their presence with smoke. It was often food logistics that determined the outcome of military campaigns on the plains. Modern nutritionists studying the composition of pemmican are amazed at its balance for conditions of extreme stress. It contains everything necessary for the body to function: proteins for muscles, fats for warmth, and carbohydrates from berries for brain function. It was an ideal balance of macronutrients, created intuitively but with surgical precision. Today, we are used to relying on refrigerators and preservatives with incomprehensible codes on the labels. We throw away food that has been sitting in the heat for a couple of hours, fearing food poisoning. Ancient technology teaches us that nature itself provides the tools to preserve its gifts, if we know how to use them. Pemmican is a monument to human ingenuity in the fight against hunger. It would be very interesting to hear your point of view. Would you agree to eat only this concentrate on a hike? Or would you prefer modern canned food? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about a dwelling that is smarter than many modern houses? We are used to thinking of the Indian tepee as a simple tent made of skins and sticks, a primitive shelter from the rain. This stereotype has been imposed on us by old movies and children's books, where the life of indigenous peoples is shown in an overly simplified way. In fact, this conical structure is the result of centuries of engineering evolution, perfectly adapted to the extreme climate of the Great Plains. The inhabitants of the prairies could not afford to make mistakes. Because the price of an engineering miscalculation, there was the life of the entire tribe. This is not just a hut, but a complex aerodynamic system with adjustable climate control. European engineers spent centuries coming up with solutions that nomads used every day. The geometry of the tepee is not a random choice, but a precise calculation of resistance to the winds that knock people off their feet on the plains. The cone is the most stable shape, allowing the wind to flow around the dwelling, pressing it to the ground rather than knocking it over. When hurricane-force winds hit the wall of a conventional house, they create enormous pressure. In the case of a tepee, the wind simply slides down the sloping surface, curving around it on both sides. But the main secret lies not in the shape, but in the unique ventilation system, which modern tourists often do not even suspect. Most modern tents become stuffy after an hour of staying in them, but the tepee does not have this drawback. Unlike a conventional tent, the tepee has adjustable smoke vents at the top, controlled by long poles from the outside. These vents were often called the ears of the tepee, and they acted as a complex exhaust pipe. The inhabitants could turn these vents with or against the wind, precisely adjusting the draft. This required skill, but allowed complete control of the airflow. This made it possible to build open fires right inside the dwelling without fear of suffocating from smoke. In the center of the room was a hearth that warmed people and was used to cook food. The smoke rose straight up, drawn in by the airflow created by the temperature difference. However, a simple hole in the roof would not have been enough without another ingenious element, an inner lining, or so-called dew curtain. Without this detail, the tepee would have been just a cold tent, but with it, it turned into a thermos. This was a piece of leather or thick fabric that was attached to poles inside the tepee at human height, descending to the ground. In fact, inside the large cone, another small cylinder without a roof was built. This created a double wall effect, which is used in modern construction. There was an air gap between the outer covering of the tepee and this inner wall. Cold, fresh air flowed under the outer edge of the covering, which was specially lifted in hot weather or left with gaps. The fresh air did not blow on the feet of sleeping people, but went into this technical corridor. This air passed through a tunnel between the outer and inner walls, heated up, and rushed upward toward the smoke vent. The physics of the process worked flawlessly. A powerful convection draft was created, which literally sucked the smoke from the fire and provided a constant supply of oxygen. In winter, this air gap worked as an ideal heat insulator, keeping the heat inside the living area. Air itself is a poor conductor of heat, and this layer prevented the cold from penetrating inside the room. Thanks to this system, it was always warm and dry inside the tepee, even when a blizzard was raging outside and the temperature was freezing. The temperature inside could be comfortable enough to live without outer clothing, while outside the thin leather wall was deadly cold. The inner lining also protected people from drafts and condensation, which ran down the outer wall without entering the living space. Moisture simply drained into the ground around the perimeter without dripping on the inhabitants' heads. In summer, by lifting the lower edges of the outer covering, the Indians turned the tepee into a giant umbrella with constant ventilation. The system also worked in reverse, protecting not from the cold, but from the unbearable heat. Hot air instantly rose, creating coolness in the shade of the skins, even under the scorching sun of the prairies. It was an air conditioning system that worked exclusively on the laws of physics, without a single watt of energy. The Tipis construction was also a well-thought-out technology, as the slope of the cone was not perfectly symmetrical. If you look closely, the teepee is not a regular cone, but slightly sloped backward. The back wall was steeper, which made the dwelling more resistant to the prevailing westerly winds and increased the usable space inside. The wind slid down the gentle front without encountering any resistance. The entrance was always oriented to the east, facing the sun and turning away from the winds. In the morning, the first rays of the sun woke the inhabitants, and the door was always protected from the gusts of wind blowing from the west. This design allowed nomadic peoples to have a full-fledged, warm, and safe home that could be assembled and disassembled in an hour. Usually, women were in charge of setting it up, and they coped with this task with virtuoso speed. It was a mobile home that surpassed many stationary buildings of that time in terms of comfort. While settlers were building heavy log cabins or dugouts, Native Americans moved their cities following the bison herds. Europeans in their damp and stuffy military tents often envied the inhabitants of Tipis. Army tents were cold in winter and stifling in summer, while the perfectly designed dwellings of the local inhabitants stood nearby. This architecture proves that comfort does not always require complex mechanisms and electronics. Sometimes it is enough to understand how air moves and make it work for you. Did you know that Native Americans use not only wind, but also mushrooms to survive? In the next chapter, you will learn how to carry fire in your pocket through a wet forest. What I am about to show you is banned in 12 countries as too risky a method of crossing, but for Native Americans it was routine. The rivers of North America, especially the capricious and wide Missouri, were a serious obstacle for travelers. Building heavy wooden boats or rafts was time-consuming and impractical for nomadic tribes, for whom speed was important. The answer to this challenge was the Bullboat, a vessel that looks like a large basket but has remarkable buoyancy. The design of this boat is unique in its extreme simplicity and efficient use of available materials. The frame was assembled from flexible willow rods, which were woven into a hemisphere resembling a huge bowl. Willow was the ideal material, light, elastic, and growing in abundance along riverbanks. The main secret was the planking. A single piece of bison hide was used for this, hence the name of the boat. The hide was taken raw, untanned, and stretched over the frame with the wool inside or outside, depending on the season. As it dried, the raw hide tightly pulled the frame together, turning into a hard and durable shell similar to plastic. Any seams were carefully coated with a mixture of fat and ash, making the vessel completely waterproof. Such a boat weighed incredibly little. A woman could easily carry it on her back using a special strap. This made the crossings mobile. They approached the river, lowered the boat, swam across, and carried it on. The shape of a round bowl may seem inconvenient for steering, and this is indeed the case. Such a boat constantly rotates. However, it was this shape that made it virtually unsinkable in rough water with whirlpools. It did not cut through the waves, but rose above them like a float, withstanding a considerable load. The carrying capacity of this basket was astonishing. A single boat with a diameter of 1.5 meters could carry several people and hundreds of kilograms of cargo. The Indians used them to transport goods, hunted meat, and even to ferry the elderly and children across. They were steered with a single short paddle, and rowing had to be done in a special way to compensate for the rotation. This required skill, but an experienced rower could cross a wide river in a matter of minutes. The boats were often tied together to create stable floating platforms. For the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara peoples who lived permanently on the banks of the Missouri River, these boats were the primary means of transportation. They used them for fishing and trading expeditions to their neighbors. It was the ideal transportation for local conditions, cheap, quick to build, and reliable. When the boat was not in use, it was pulled ashore and dried to prevent the skin from rotting. With proper care, such a vessel could serve for years, requiring only periodic greasing. If the planking became unusable, it was simply removed and a new skin was stretched over it after a successful hunt. This invention demonstrates how a complex transportation problem can be solved using only branches and skin. The genius lies not in the complexity of the mechanism, but in the perfect suitability of the materials for the task at hand. Do you agree? Please tell us what you think about this. Every opinion is valuable. What if everything you've been taught about making fire by friction is outdated? We often imagine ancient people spinning a stick in their palms for hours to produce a spark. This image has become firmly entrenched in our minds thanks to survival lessons and adventure books. It is indeed a working method, but it is incredibly laborious, especially if the wood is wet after rain. Spending an hour rotating a stick, losing precious calories and strength, was an unaffordable luxury for a traveler. Moreover, in high humidity conditions, this method often did not work at all. The Indians of the Great Plains and Forests knew a secret that allowed them not to make fire from scratch every time, but to carry it with them. They treated fire not as something that needed to be created, but as a companion that needed to be cherished. The main protagonist of this technology was an inconspicuous growth on birch trunks, known to us as the tinder fungus. Native Americans were well aware of the properties of the inner, spongy part of this fungus, which feels like suede or felt to the touch. This material was harvested in advance, dried and stored in dry bags as a valuable commodity. If even a single spark fell on such prepared pulp, it would begin to smolder. The burning process was slow and steady, like high-quality charcoal. The mushroom did not produce an open flame that could burn the carrier or be extinguished by the wind, but it retained intense heat inside. This allowed the fire to be preserved for long hours of travel. This smoldering material was placed in a specially prepared container, most often made from a bison horn or a hollow piece of wood. The horn was ideal because it was strong, light, and not afraid of heat from within. It was filled with tightly compressed rotten wood or the same tinder fungus, creating a soft bed for the charcoal. This created an isolated environment with limited oxygen access. Air entered the horn only through tiny holes, just enough to keep the coal alive, but not enough to cause a flame to flare up. In this peculiar safe, the flame could live for days, slowly consuming the fuel. A traveler stopping for the night after a long journey simply shook the smoldering piece out of the horn onto the prepared kindling. He did not need to look for dry wood, prepare a bow drill, or strike a spark with flint, cutting his hands until they bled. The whole procedure took only a few moments and required minimal effort. All he had to do was fan the ready-made ember, put dry grass on it, and in a minute the fire was crackling merrily. This technology was vital on winter hikes or during prolonged rains, when everything around was saturated with moisture. In the forest, where every branch is soaked through, it is almost impossible to get a fire from scratch. Losing a fire in such harsh weather conditions could mean serious danger to life and the risk of freezing. Without heat, it was impossible to dry clothes or cook food, so fire was treated with religious reverence. Therefore, the firekeeper was one of the most valuable items in a hunter's equipment. In addition to tinder fungus, dry bison dung was also used, which also had the ability to smolder for a long time without flaring up. On treeless plains where trees grew only near rare rivers, it was the main fuel. It was pressed into dense briquettes and carried in clay pots or wrapped in wet leaves and thick leather. This fuel was always available on the plains, and the Indians learned to use it with maximum efficiency. Such briquettes gave off an even heat and could smolder throughout the day. Knowledge of the properties of various mushrooms and types of wood was passed down from generation to generation. The Indians were excellent botanists and chemists of their time. They knew which mushroom would produce the hottest coals and which would smolder the longest, saving resources. It was a true science of combustion, based on thousands of years of practice and observation of nature. The ability to preserve fire was valued even more highly in the tribe than the ability to obtain it by primitive means. In some tribes, there were special people responsible for maintaining the eternal fire during migrations. This honorable duty was entrusted to the most reliable members of the community. It was a symbol of life and continuity of the community, connecting the past and future of the tribe. Portable fire allowed people to feel safe wherever they went. It is difficult for modern people, accustomed to gas lighters, to imagine the value of this skill. We are used to fire appearing at the snap of our fingers, but any mechanism can break. But try building a fire in the forest in the rain without chemicals, and you will understand the genius of this simple solution by ancient engineers. They used the laws of physics and knowledge of materials to tame the elements. What modern survival item do you think could compare in importance to this portable fire? In the next chapter, you'll learn what super glue was made of, which held stronger than epoxy resin. In a world without hardware stores, joining two pieces together is no trivial task. This is especially true when it comes to weapons on which your life depends, such as a composite bow or a stone axe. Native Americans did not use ropes for everything. They knew recipes for glue that could rival modern epoxy resins in strength. The ingredients for this chemical miracle were provided by nature itself. The basis of the strongest glue was animal connective tissue. The hooves of bison, deer, or moose were boiled in water for hours until they turned into a thick, viscous, gelatinous mass. This process required patience and temperature control so that the collagen would break down properly but not burn. The resulting substance was dried, turning it into solid tiles similar to carpenter's glue, which could be stored indefinitely. When needed, a piece of this concentrate was soaked in water and heated. The hot glue penetrated the pores of the wood and bone, creating a bond at the molecular level. Special components were added to the glue to make it water-resistant and elastic. One of the secret ingredients was pine or fir resin, which was collected from trees. Resin is sticky on its own, but brittle in the cold and soft in the heat, so it had to be modified. Finely ground charcoal and dry manure from herbivorous animals were mixed into the molten resin. The charcoal acted as a reinforcing filler, binding the resin structure and making it incredibly hard after solidification. The result was a black mastic, which was used to attach stone arrowheads and spearheads to shafts. This mastic was applied to the joints, and after hardening, it became as hard as stone. Such cement was not affected by moisture or temperature changes, reliably holding the tip even when striking bone or stone. The tip could only be removed by heating the mixture again. Special skill was required to create composite bows, where layers of wood, horn, and tendons were glued together under enormous tension. Here they used the purest glue from the swim bladders of sturgeonfish, which had incredible adhesion and elasticity. Such a bow could serve its owner for a lifetime without delaminating from moisture. Indians also used the sap of blue acacia roots and other plants for lighter gluing tasks. They knew the properties of every plant and every part of every animal. Nothing was thrown away. Horns, hooves, skin, everything was put to use. This primitive glue was so effective that many museum exhibits found by archaeologists hundreds of years later still retain the strength of their joints. Arrowheads fit into their shafts as tightly as they did on the day they were made by the craftsman. This proves that a deep knowledge of materials can replace synthetic polymers. Nature has already created everything we need. We just need to know the right recipe for mixing. Guess what happened next when Europeans first saw Native Americans washing their clothes? There is a stereotype that people in the past were dirty and unwashed. But when it comes to the indigenous peoples of America, this statement is far from the truth. Personal hygiene was an important part of their culture, and they used the amazing gifts of nature to keep themselves clean. In the prairies and deserts, where there were no stores selling household chemicals, the main source of cleanliness was the yucca root. Yucca, or soapgrass, grows in the arid lands of the Great West. The Indians knew that if you dug up the massive root of this plant, cleaned it, and ground it with stones, you would get a fibrous paste. When mixed with water, this mass produces a rich, thick lather that is comparable to modern shampoos. This natural soap contains saponins, substances that are excellent at breaking down grease and dirt. Women used yucca foam to wash delicate deerskin and fabrics. Unlike the harsh alkaline soap that Europeans made from ash and fat, yucca juice was gentle and did not damage natural materials. But its main use was for washing hair. Native Americans were famous for their thick, shiny black hair, and this was largely due to natural shampoo. Yucca not only cleansed, but also fought dandruff and parasites thanks to its antiseptic properties. The washing process often turned into a ritual. In some tribes, such as the Navajo, washing hair with yucca foam was an obligatory part of wedding ceremonies and purification rites. It symbolized washing away the past and renewing the spirit and body. In addition to yucca, other plants were also used, such as soapwort or certain types of wild berries, which also produced foam. Split tree branches with antibacterial sap and charcoal were used as an abrasive to clean teeth. For Native Americans, bodily cleanliness was associated with spiritual purity and good luck in hunting. Hunters had to wash away their human scent so that animals would not smell them. Therefore, frequent bathing in rivers and the use of steam baths in Ipi were a normal part of life. The steam bath was not just a hygienic procedure, but a powerful medical and spiritual tool. In a small dome-shaped hut covered with skins, water was poured onto hot stones, often with the addition of herbs such as sage, cedar, or fragrant grass. This helped to remove toxins and cleanse the pores. In this way, Native Americans maintained a high level of hygiene using renewable natural resources. They did not need plastic bottles of shampoo that pollute the environment. Their cosmetics grew right under their feet. Do you think modern hygiene products could stand the test of time like yucca root did? In the next chapter, we'll reveal the secret of how to drink water from a dirty river and not die. Water is the source of life, but in the wild, it often becomes a source of disease. Drinking directly from the murky Missouri River or a stagnant pond was deadly even for the hardened body of an ancient hunter. A seemingly calm river could carry an invisible threat from which there was no escape. The Indians knew that invisible enemies in the water could kill faster than an enemy's arrow. Poisoning or infection would put a warrior out of action for weeks, making him a burden to the tribe. To get clean water where there seemed to be none, they used an ingenious method that today would be called an earth pump. Instead of drawing water directly from the murky stream, they retreated several meters from the shore. The Indians chose a place where the soil was loose and sandy enough. There they dug a deep hole, the bottom of which was significantly lower than the water level in the river. Once this was done, all that remained was to wait and observe the laws of physics. Under pressure, the water from the river began to seep through the thickness of the earth, gradually filling the dug well. This process was slow, but the result was worth the wait. Passing through meters of sand, clay, and fine gravel, the river water underwent natural multi-stage filtration. The dense layers of soil acted as a fine sieve, filtering out physical contaminants. The earth reliably trapped silt, algae, and a significant portion of harmful bacteria. As a result, crystal clear, cold water collected in the pit, even if a muddy stream flowed in the river itself 2 meters from this place. The difference was visible to the naked eye and was striking in its obviousness. This method took time, but it guaranteed safety for the entire camp. Such an improvised well could be set up at almost any campsite near a body of water. However, if the soil was rocky and it was impossible to dig a hole, another ingenious method was used. It was a prototype of modern individual survival filters. They took a hollow bone from a large animal or a thick reed stalk and turned it into a tube. This container was tightly packed with bundles of stiff grass, clean river sand, and crushed charcoal. Through such a tube, they drank water directly from the source, using it as a primitive but effective filter. The layers of filler trapped the suspended solids, and the charcoal performed chemical purification. Charcoal was known for its absorbent properties long before activated charcoal appeared in our pharmacies. The Indians intuitively understood that charcoal draws harmful substances out of the water and removes the unpleasant, swampy smell. There was also a method of heat treatment. By throwing red-hot stones or hot coals from a fire into a vessel of water, they further disinfected it. The water quickly boiled, killing microorganisms, while the charcoal continued its purification work. In the desert regions of the Southwest, knowing where to dig was an essential survival skill. An experienced tracker could read the landscape like an open book. They looked for certain plants, such as willow or poplar, which always grow where the groundwater is close to the surface. A green patch of foliage against the backdrop of the scorched desert was a sure sign of salvation. Even in a completely dry riverbed, life-giving moisture could be obtained by digging a deep hole in the right place at the roots of these trees. They also knew about the water-purifying properties of certain stones and minerals, using silicon and zeolites. Water was often stored in special clay vessels with porous walls. These vessels functioned like ancient refrigerators. Moisture slowly seeped through the pores and evaporated from the surface, cooling the contents even in the most intense heat. This allowed the water to stay fresh for a long time. Cold water is less susceptible to bacterial growth than warm water, which was critically important in hot climates. This knowledge and technology allowed entire tribes to move safely across arid lands without being tied to large, clean water sources. They were not dependent on the whims of the weather. They knew how to extract water literally from under the ground, using the planet itself as a giant and reliable filter. Today, tourists buy expensive membrane filters and chlorine tablets, relying on technology. But the ancient method of digging a hole near the shore still works and requires nothing more than a stick and patience. This is a lesson that the most effective solutions often lie on the surface, or in this case, just below it. The blinding sun reflected off endless snowfields can burn the retina in a matter of hours. Snow blindness is a painful condition in which the eyes feel as if they are filled with sand and tears flow continuously. For a hunter, this meant helplessness and starvation. The peoples of the north and the inhabitants of the snow-covered plains invented a simple device that worked better than sunglasses. They made special glasses out of wood, bone, birch bark, or thick leather. The main feature of these glasses was that they had no lenses. Instead of lenses, narrow horizontal slits were cut into a solid plate. The principle of operation was based on the physics of light. The narrow slit cut off most of the direct and reflected sunlight, allowing only a small fraction of the light necessary for vision to pass through. This worked like a camera diaphragm, sharply reducing the intensity of the light flux. In addition to protecting against glare, these glasses had an amazing optical effect. They increased visual acuity. Looking through a narrow slit, a hunter could better distinguish details on the horizon, which was critical for tracking prey. The pinhole, camera obscura, effect helped even people with poor eyesight to see more clearly. The inside of the glasses was always blackened with soot. This was necessary to eliminate glare from the material of the glasses themselves, which could irritate the eyes. The black color absorbed excess light, creating a comfortable darkness in front of the eyes. The shape of the glasses was carefully adjusted to fit the wearer's face so that light could not penetrate from the sides or bottom. They were secured to the head with leather straps. Unlike their glass counterparts, these glasses did not fog up, break, or freeze. This invention was used not only by the Inuit in the Arctic, but also by tribes in the northern plains during the winter. The manufacture of glasses was a real art. They were decorated with carvings, turning them into personal amulets. Modern ophthalmologists confirm the effectiveness of such protection. In an extreme situation, if you lose your Ray-Bans in the mountains, a piece of bark with slits or even a strip of adhesive tape with a slit for the eyes can save your vision. The Indians understood the nature of light and the anatomy of the eye on an intuitive level. They created a device that solved a complex medical problem without high technology. This is an example of how limitations, the lack of glass, lead to the creation of more reliable and practical solutions. Snow goggles are a triumph of functional design. The Great Plains were often referred to as a sea of grass, and this comparison was frighteningly accurate. It is thousands of kilometers of monotonous landscape, where there are no mountains, no tall trees, and no familiar roads. All around, a person stretched only an endless horizon that looked the same in all directions. It was easy to get lost here, and losing your bearings meant certain death from thirst and despair. In this green ocean, there were no landmarks for the inexperienced traveler to catch their eye. How did the Indians find their way home and accurately reach their campsites without compasses, maps, or GPS? They read the book of nature, which we modern people, unfortunately, have forgotten how to understand and notice. For them, the steppe was not empty, but filled with information. One only needed to know how to decipher it. One of the main and most reliable landmarks was the wind. In each season, the plains are dominated by winds of certain and constant directions that rarely change. Knowing that in summer the warm wind blows mainly from the south, and in winter the cold wind comes from the north, the traveler could stay on course. It was enough for him to simply feel the airflow on his cheek to understand where he was going. The vegetation also served as a reliable living compass underfoot. Under the influence of constant winds, tall grass eventually learns to lean in one direction. Even on a windless day, the stalks pointed in the direction of the prevailing air currents, like frozen arrows. Smaller details of the landscape also provided important clues to the attentive observer. Anthills, for example, are usually built on the south side of rocks or bushes to get more solar heat during the day. Moss and lichens on sparse boulders, on the contrary, grew on the north, shady side where moisture was retained longer. At night, navigation was guided by the stars, which was perhaps the most accurate coordinate system. The North Star was a fixed point of reference for the north, and the Indians called it the star that does not move. It was the anchor around which the entire sky revolved. The location of other constellations, such as the Big Dipper, often called the Seven Brothers, helped to determine not only the cardinal directions, but also the time. The sky worked like a giant clock, allowing them to understand with great accuracy how much time was left before dawn. During the day, they created mental maps in their heads, memorizing the smallest features of the terrain that we would not even notice. It could be a barely noticeable bend in a dry stream, an unusual color of soil on a slope, or a specific group of shrubs. These landmarks were passed down in oral stories from father to son, turning dry geography into the living history of the tribe. The route sounded like a story. Go to where the white bison was killed, then turn toward the stream of dry willows. This connection to events allowed them to remember the route for a lifetime. In addition, special man-made signs, understandable only to their own people, were widely used. Stone pyramids, known as cairns, stacked on hilltops, indicated the direction to the nearest water or safe passages through ravines. These signs could stand for decades, helping many generations. Sometimes scouts used more temporary markers for those who followed. Bunches of grass were tied with a specific knot, or branches of shrubs were bent in a special way. This was a message. We went east, or it is dangerous here. A sense of direction was cultivated from early childhood and became automatic. Children were taught to constantly track the position of the sun and memorize the route, even while playing. This became second nature, an instinct that worked without conscious effort. A hunter going after prey always subconsciously recorded his route, periodically looking back. This allowed him to remember what the road looked like in the opposite direction, so that he could return even in thick fog or a blizzard. They also closely monitored the migration of animals and the flight of birds, trusting their instincts. In the evening, birds always fly low and straight to the water, and bison move to new pastures along the most convenient and gentle paths. Nature itself suggested the easiest path to those who knew how to listen to its rhythm. To the modern city dweller, the steppe seems empty, boring, and completely uniform. To the Native American, it was full of road signs, pointers, and warnings, like a modern highway. This was not a mystical sixth sense, as is often written in novels, but the result of extreme attentiveness and observation. Losing your compass is scary, but losing the ability to observe the world is much more dangerous. Ancient navigators prove that the human brain is still the best orientation tool that does not require batteries. Dozens of tribes lived on the Great Plains: the Sioux, Cheyenne, Crow, Arapaho, and Kiowa. They all spoke completely different languages, sometimes as dissimilar as Russian and Chinese. But when they met, they could communicate freely, trade, form alliances, and tell stories. How was this possible without translators and dictionaries? The answer was plain sign language. It was a unique linguistic system, a universal interface connecting the entire continent. It was not primitive pantomime, but a full-fledged language with grammar, syntax, and a rich vocabulary. The sign for bison imitated horns. The sign for woman was combing long hair. The sign for truth was a finger pointing straight from the heart. Hundreds and thousands of combinations allowed for the communication of complex concepts, from the terms of a peace treaty to descriptions of the terrain. This language allowed communication in complete silence, which was critical for hunting or military reconnaissance. A group of hunters could coordinate their actions within sight of each other without making a sound that might scare away the game. The range of communication was increased with the help of other wireless technologies. Smoke signals were the telegraph of the prairies. By interrupting a column of smoke with a blanket, a scout could transmit a message over many kilometers. Enemies are close. Herd found. All is quiet. The code was known only to their own people so that the enemy could not intercept the message. They also used mirrors made of mica or polished metal to reflect sunlight. On a clear day, a heliograph flash could be seen from a distance of up to 30-40 kilometers. This was true optical communication long before the advent of fiber optics. At night, signals were sent using burning arrows or imitation animal cries: coyote, owl, wolf. Every warrior knew this sound code. If an owl cried 3 times in a row at the wrong interval, it was an alarm signal, not a bird. Sign language was also used to communicate with deaf members of the tribe, who were thus fully integrated into society. Later, when the Europeans arrived, this language helped establish initial contact. This communication system is striking in its elegance. It overcame language barriers without forcing anyone to learn a foreign language. It was Esperanto, created by life itself. Today, we depend on cell towers. The Indians built a network that worked on human intelligence and sunlight. Their internet could not be turned off. We have examined only a small part of the survival arsenal possessed by the indigenous peoples of America. From preserving food in Pemmican to the high-tech aerodynamics of the tepee, each of their solutions was a hymn to rationality and observation. They did not conquer nature, but learned from it, turning stones, grass, and skins into tools that are as effective as their modern counterparts. These forgotten hacks are not just history. They are a reminder that the human mind is capable of finding a way out of any situation if it is open to the world. Perhaps in an era of environmental crises and technological vulnerability, we should take another look at the experience of those who knew how to live on this earth without leaving scars on it. Write in the comments about which other people's lives you would like to learn about. Would you be interested in hearing about survival in the Amazon jungle or the sands of the Sahara? Suggest your topics and we will definitely consider them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.